Her billionaire husband came with a pregnant mistress, but her letter was the real shock. Marissa always believed that the quiet moments of a morning could reveal the truth about a day, whether it would bring peace or a storm. But on this particular morning, she woke with a pressure in her chest she couldn't explain. It wasn't fear. It wasn't dread. Just a subtle shift in the atmosphere, the kind that tells you life is standing on the edge of a change you didn't ask for. She brushed it off at first, made tea, straightened the living room, tried to shake the heaviness sinking deeper into her thoughts. But then the front door opened. Jake stood there, her husband, the man she once trusted without hesitation, looking hollow, cautious, almost guilty, and beside him, a woman. A woman carrying a child that clearly wasn't hers. The floor didn't just drop from beneath Marissa. It collapsed, yet the worst part wasn't the woman, or the child. It was the sealed letter she held out, addressed to Marissa. Before that moment, Marissa's worries had always been ordinary. Is Jake working too hard? Are we drifting? Did I say something wrong last night? The kind of concerns any spouse might quietly carry when love feels stretched thin, but still worth fighting for. She knew the ache of waiting for a partner to come home late. She knew the sting of unanswered questions lodged between two people who once shared everything. Many people have stood where she stood, in a house that feels familiar, while the person you love begins to feel distant. Anyone who has ever loved deeply understands that strange battle between loyalty and fear, the fear that something is changing, and you can't quite grasp why. But nothing, no conversation, no late-night doubt, no moment of worry, prepared her for the sight of that expectant stranger at her door. Every insecurity she'd buried rose at once, and the question every spouse dreads echoed in her mind. What happened to us? Marissa's pulse hammered as she stared at the pair in her doorway. The woman shifted uncomfortably, clutching her stomach as if shielding the life growing inside her. Jake wouldn't even meet her eyes. His silence cut deeper than any confession could. In a single heartbeat, every unanswered call, every late-night return, every "I'm just tired" love, suddenly felt like pieces of a puzzle she never wanted to solve. Her mind screamed with questions she couldn't voice out loud. Was this intentional? Was she being replaced? Had her marriage been slipping through her fingers while she tried to hold it together alone? But beneath the shock, beneath the heartbreak, there was a deeper wound forming, the sense that something important had been kept from her. Not just a mistake, but a truth her husband had been too afraid to speak. And now, with one stranger, one child, and one letter, he had no choice but to face it. The envelope in the woman's hand seemed small, almost harmless, yet Marissa couldn't shake the feeling that whatever waited inside would turn her world in a direction she never expected. Jake finally lifted his gaze, and in his eyes she saw a mixture of regret, fear, and something else she couldn't read. "Marissa, please," he said, voice thin and trembling. "Just hear us out." Us. That single word struck like lightning. Why would he need someone else to speak for him? Why couldn't he explain what happened on his own? The woman stepped forward slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "This letter? It's not what you think. You deserve to know everything. Everything." A promise that sounded like salvation and devastation at the same time. Marissa didn't know it yet, but the contents of that letter would change not only her understanding of her marriage. Before Marissa even opened the letter, Her hands trembled, not from weakness, but from the weight of the choice she knew was coming. Whatever message waited inside would either break what remained of her marriage or expose truths she never imagined. The air felt tight. The moment stretched thin, and she sensed her next decision would shape the rest of her life. Should she walk away now, before hearing another word? Should she force Jake to speak before she read a single line? Or should she open the letter and face the truth directly, no matter how much it hurt? Her heart thudded painfully as she held the envelope to her chest. For those watching this story unfold right now, tell me, what would you do if a letter like this was handed to you? Would you read it, or refuse to let another person define the truth of your relationship? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you're new here or returning, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Because what's written in that letter will change everything. Rain had always been a quiet companion in Marissa's life, but that evening outside the small cafe felt different, almost like the sky was pausing long enough for something meaningful to happen. She stood beneath the awning, hugging her notebook against her chest, watching droplets race each other down the fabric edge. She didn't expect anything remarkable to occur. Her days were predictable, teaching, encouraging students, giving more of herself than she ever received. But fate often chooses its moment without permission. A dark car pulled up, sleek enough to look out of place in the modest neighborhood. The door opened, and Jake stepped out with an ease that suggested he carried the world yet refused to show its weight. He shook grain from his shoulders and offered her a smile. Warm, genuine, completely unexpected. "You look like someone waiting for the clouds to show mercy," he teased lightly. Marissa laughed. "I think the sky enjoys testing my patience." That first exchange lasted only seconds, but something inside her shifted. It wasn't attraction in the ordinary sense. It was recognition. Two people from different worlds meeting in a moment that shouldn't have mattered, but did. He introduced himself casually, as though he weren't widely known in business circles. She quickly realized he was nothing like the polished stories people whispered about the Irvine Empire. He spoke with sincerity. He listened without rushing. He looked at her as though her words held value. When he finally offered her a ride home, she surprised herself by accepting. Not because he was wealthy. Not because his presence filled the space with confidence, but because being around him felt safe, an instinct she didn't question. That single ride turned into dinner the next evening, which turned into early morning coffee, which turned into days that flowed together so effortlessly she barely remembered the time before him. Jake admired her kindness, her belief in people, her commitment to helping others. She admired his discipline, his unexpected gentleness, his ability to soften around her in ways she doubted he showed anyone else. For a year, their love wasn't rushed or loud. It grew the way dawn arrives, quietly, steadily, illuminating everything without demanding attention. When he proposed beneath that same cafe awning where their story began, he didn't bring photographers or grand gestures. Just himself. Just the truth in his voice when he said, "You make my life easier to understand. I want forever with you." She didn't need time to think. She said yes. And in that moment, Marissa believed the universe had finally rewarded her patience with a love she never thought she'd experience. If only she knew that even the strongest beginnings can hide fractures waiting for the right moment to appear. In the early months of their marriage, Marissa often woke to the sound of Jake typing beside her. Soft, steady, determined. He wasn't just building companies, he was shaping an empire crafted from long nights, strategic decisions, and the kind of pressure only a few people in the world could understand. She admired him for that, loved him for it, but as time passed, success demanded more than she expected, and it began taking more from Jake than he admitted. In the beginning, his late returns home made sense. Meetings, deadlines, unexpected emergencies. He'd always been a man who ran toward responsibility, not from it. Marissa greeted him each night with warm meals, gentle conversations, and quiet support. She believed firmly that companionship meant standing beside someone through both peace and strain. Yet slowly, she started noticing shifts that didn't match the rhythm of their earlier days. He stopped joining her for breakfast. He spoke less at dinner. He stared at his phone longer, as though waiting for messages she never saw. When she asked about his day, his answers grew shorter, almost rehearsed. Just work. Nothing new, exhausting meeting. I don't want to talk about it. Everything's fine. Really. But everything didn't feel fine. Not anymore. The warmth that once filled their home began thinning, like breath fading on a cold day. Some nights she waited by the window, glancing at the driveway for headlights that never appeared until dawn. She tried to tell herself it was normal for a man like Jake, a man responsible for thousands of employees, to be stretched thin. She understood ambition. She respected his drive. Still, the silences between them grew longer. Unasked questions grew heavier. There were moments she reached for his hand and felt him hesitate. Only for a second, but long enough for her heart to notice. One evening, after a particularly long stretch of him being distant, Marissa gathered her courage and approached him in his study. His jaw was tight, his shoulders tense, and he looked at his computer screen as though it were the only thing keeping him upright. "Jake," she said softly, "you've barely spoken to me this week. Can we talk for a moment?" He rubbed his temples, a sign she had learned meant stress pressing hard against him. "I'm swamped, love. It's just the workload. I promise things will calm down soon, but you've been saying that for months," she whispered. He closed his eyes, defeated. Please, don't take it personally. But how could she not, when the man who once held her with certainty now seemed to drift like smoke she couldn't grasp? She left his study feeling more alone than she had ever felt in their entire relationship. She tried different ways to bridge the gap. Surprise lunches at his office, weekend getaway suggestions, late-night conversations. But each attempt fell against a wall she couldn't see, a barrier he couldn't or wouldn't explain. One afternoon, while folding laundry, she heard his phone buzz on the table. He was in the shower. She had no intention of snooping. She trusted him, or at least she wanted to. But when the device lit up, the name that appeared wasn't familiar. A woman's name. A name she didn't recognize at all. Her stomach tightened. When Jake emerged, she said nothing. She placed the folded shirts beside him and forced a smile. She didn't want to accuse him without reason. She didn't want to become suspicious simply because the unknown frightened her. But the questions wouldn't leave her. They grew louder with each missed dinner, each late return, each message he dismissed with a quick swipe and a vague work stuff. She felt herself drifting between trust and fear, two forces pulling her in opposite directions. But she held on. She believed in him. She believed in the love they built from the ground up. Yet no matter how hard she tried, something inside her whispered that their marriage was changing. Slowly, quietly, without warning. Still, she never imagined the truth would arrive the way it did. on a morning too calm for what was coming, in the form of a woman who carried proof of choices she never knew her husband had made. If only she had known how close the storm truly was. Morning sunlight filtered gently through the tall windows of the Irvine estate, stretching across the polished floors in soft lines. Marissa stood in the kitchen, preparing tea the way she always did, precisely 3 minutes steeped, a habit she'd never changed. It was supposed to be a peaceful start to the day. Something steady, something familiar. It can be broken in a single breath. As she reached for a spoon, the front door opened, abruptly, sharply, as though pushed by a weight heavier than the hand turning its handle. She froze. Jake wasn't expected home so early. He had left the night before for what he described as an urgent business matter, a phrase she had come to know all too well. "Jake," she called out, wiping her hands on a towel. Her voice echoed slightly before footsteps responded, slow, hesitant, not at all like the confident stride that usually filled the house. She turned toward the doorway, and the world beneath her seemed to tilt. Jake stood there, eyes lowered, shoulders drawn inward like a man carrying something he didn't know how to put down. But it wasn't just him. A woman stood beside him. A woman Marissa had never seen before. She looked young, mid-20s perhaps, nervous, with soft features twisted into an expression of discomfort and regret. Her hands rested protectively around her belly, round and noticeable even beneath her loose dress. Marissa's grip faltered. The spoon slipped from her hand and clattered onto the counter. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears, thunderous and disorienting. She looked at Jake, waiting for an explanation she wasn't sure she wanted. He took a breath that sounded like it hurt. "Marissa," he said quietly, "we need to talk." Her stomach twisted. Those 4 words were never good. Never gentle. Never the start of something hopeful. The woman lowered her eyes, as if she couldn't bear to meet Marissa's gaze. The way she held her stomach, the hesitance in her posture, the discomfort in her expression. It all blended into a truth that felt too sharp to swallow. Marissa stepped back instinctively, her voice barely forming the question. "Who is she?" Jake didn't answer immediately. The delay was an answer on its own. Finally, he said, "This is Delia." The name meant nothing to her, yet the situation said everything. Marissa's eyes dropped to the woman's rounded belly. The truth hit her with a force that nearly knocked her off balance. She felt faint. The kitchen, once warm and familiar, now felt like a place closing in around her. Her throat tightened. "Is that your child?" Jake looked at the floor. That was all she needed to see. Her legs trembled. She gripped the edge of the counter to keep herself upright, willing herself not to collapse in front of them. Her mind screamed, but her voice came out in a whisper. "How could you do this to me?" Jake stepped forward, guilt written across his features. "It wasn't planned. I made mistakes, but I never wanted you to be hurt. I was going to tell you." "When?" She cut in sharply, tears threatening to spill. "After the baby was born? After I noticed you disappearing more than you already have?" He flinched at her words. "I was trying to find the right moment. There is no right moment for this," she snapped, her pain cracking through each syllable. The woman, Delia, finally spoke, her voice trembling but sincere. I'm sorry. I didn't know he was married. Not at first." She swallowed, eyes glistening. "I didn't come to take anything from you." Marissa turned toward her slowly, her expression a mixture of shock and disbelief. "But you still came here." "I came because he needed to tell you the truth," Delia whispered. "Because this isn't what you think." Marissa felt her head spin. She stepped back again, overwhelmed and drowning in emotions she couldn't process fast enough. She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. She wanted to wake up. Instead, she stood frozen, trapped between the life she believed she had and the nightmare standing in front of her. Delia reached into her handbag and pulled out a folded envelope. Simple, white, unremarkable. Yet something about the way her hand trembled as she offered it made Marissa's skin prickle. "This is for you," Delia said. "Please, read it." Marissa stared at the envelope. A letter. A single piece of paper capable of destroying or explaining the world around her. Jake exhaled shakily. "Marissa, please go upstairs. Read it. I'll wait down here." Her hands felt numb as she took the envelope. She couldn't look at him. Not now. Maybe not for a long time. Without a word, she turned and walked toward the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. Her vision blurred, her breathing uneven. In the safety of her bedroom, she closed the door and pressed her back against it, letting the tears finally spill. She didn't know what the letter contained, but every instinct told her that what she was about to read would change everything. Marissa sat at the edge of the bed, her fingers trembling as she held the envelope. The paper felt weightless, yet it carried the force of an entire world ready to crack. She stared at her reflection in the mirror across from her, eyes red, breath shallow, shoulders tense with disbelief. How had her life changed so drastically in minutes? She forced herself to inhale. Then she slid a finger beneath the seal. The envelope opened with a soft tear, a sound so small yet so final it made her heart ache. Inside was a neatly folded sheet of paper. The handwriting wasn't Jake's. It was softer, rounder, undeniably feminine. Her pulse thudded heavily as she began reading. "Marissa, you don't know me, and you have every reason not to want to read these words, but I need you to understand what truly happened." She paused as the tear dropped onto the page, smudging the ink slightly. She wiped her eyes and continued. "When I met Jake, I didn't know he was married. I should have asked. I should have been more careful. But at the time, my life felt impossible." Marissa felt a twist in her stomach. She didn't want sympathy for this woman. Not now. Maybe not ever. But she read on. "My mother was sick. Her treatments were draining everything I had. I worked day and night, barely sleeping, barely holding myself together. I met Jake at a charity event his company sponsored. He was kind to me when I was falling apart." The words painted a picture Marissa didn't want to see. Jake offering kindness, support, compassion to someone else, while she herself had been begging silently for the same. "He arranged financial help for my mother, through the foundation, not personally. He wasn't trying to impress me or win me over. He was helping because he has a good heart. That part, at least, is true." Marissa's breath caught. Jake had never been cruel. Cold at times, distant at others, but cruel. "No." She turned the page. "I misunderstood his intentions. I pushed for something more, thinking I'd found a safe place to land. He never pursued me. When I confessed my feelings, he told me the truth, that he was married, that he loved you, that nothing could happen between us." Marissa felt a sting of conflicting emotions, hurt, confusion, anger, and begrudging relief. But before that conversation, I was already pregnant. Her chest tightened once more. The sentence sat in the air like a wound refusing to close. She continued, "I didn't come to trap him. I didn't come to destroy your marriage. I've been alone through this, trying to figure out how to raise a child when I barely have enough for myself. Jake insisted on telling you, not because he's choosing me, but because he refuses to lie to you." Marissa blinked back tears as the words blurred. "He loves you. I know it must feel impossible to believe coming from me, but I've seen the way he speaks about you. The respect, the guilt, the fear of losing you. Someone like me could never take your place in his life." Her hands tightened around the paper. "I am not staying here. I'm leaving the city after the baby arrives. I won't interfere with your marriage. I just couldn't let you think he abandoned you." For a moment, Marissa felt her breath return, slow and shaky. This wasn't betrayal born from desire. It was tragedy born from circumstance. Whatever you decide, please choose it for your happiness, not for Jake's guilt or my situation. You deserve joy, Marissa, even if it isn't with him. The final sentence read, "I hope one day you'll see that this moment, as painful as it is, doesn't have to be the end of your story." When she finished, the letter slipped from her hands and fell onto the bedspread like a defeated confession. She stared at the ceiling, tears sliding down her temples, soaking into the pillow beneath her. The truth was far more complicated than she expected. Jake hadn't planned this. He hadn't chosen this woman over her. But he had hidden it. He had let the weight of his fear overshadow the trust they once shared. She pressed her palms to her eyes, trying to gather the pieces of herself. What was she supposed to do now? She thought of their early days, simple, peaceful, full of laughter and gentle warmth. She thought of the man who held her in the rain and whispered promises under the cafe awning. And she thought of the man standing downstairs, broken and terrified, waiting for her reaction. She didn't know whether to scream or forgive or listen. But one thing was clear. The letter was only the beginning of a truth she still needed to confront. Marissa wiped her face, gathered the pages carefully, and stood. There were conversations waiting downstairs, conversations that would shape the rest of her life, and she couldn't hide from them forever. Marissa descended the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last. The letter still trembled softly between her fingers, its weight somehow greater now that she knew the full story. Her heart pounded against her ribs as if urging her to turn back, to escape the moment waiting below. But she kept going. She found Jake sitting in the living room, elbows on his knees, hands clasped, staring at the floor. The confident man the world admired, the powerful negotiator, the decisive leader, looked nothing like the person in front of her now. He looked small. He looked frightened. He stood the second he heard her footsteps. "Marissa, I'm so sorry." She held up a hand, stopping him. "Don't speak yet." He swallowed hard. His jaw tightened as he fought back whatever he wanted to say. Delia remained near the entrance, quiet, respectful, not daring to step forward. Marissa took a slow breath. I read the letter. Jake closed his eyes, as though her words pierced straight into him. "I should have told you myself. I should have been honest the moment I found out." "When did you find out?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "The day she told me," he whispered. "I walked away. I ended everything immediately. I didn't want it. I didn't ask for it. But running from the truth didn't undo what happened. Marissa took a seat, more because her legs needed relief than because her mind was ready to listen. She placed the letter on the table between them. A silent reminder of everything said, everything confessed, everything still unspoken. Jake continued, his voice raw. I never touched her after she told me. I never made promises. I never led her on. I supported her through the foundation because the baby is mine. But my loyalty, my heart, has always been with you. Her throat tightened. Then why didn't you tell me? He paced a short distance, rubbing the back of his neck anxiously, because I was a coward. I didn't want to watch you break. I didn't want to see the pain in your eyes, knowing I failed you in the worst way imaginable. I thought I could protect you by keeping it quiet until I figured out the right way to say it. That's not protection, she said softly. That's avoidance. He froze. The truth struck him harder than any accusation. You're right, he whispered. I avoided telling the person who deserved honesty more than anyone. The silence between them thickened, not hostile but bruised. Delia shifted slightly, then spoke with care. I won't stay long. I know this isn't my place. I just want you to know. I'm leaving after the baby is born. I don't want trouble. I don't want to be part of your life or your marriage. I only wanted the truth to be told. Marissa studied her. Really studied her for the first time. There was no pride in her posture, no attempt to claim anything, just guilt, sadness, and a fragile hope that honesty might ease a burden. It didn't excuse the situation, but it helped her understand it. She turned back to Jake. Did you love her? He shook his head immediately. No. I cared about her situation. I felt responsible for helping. But love? Never. Not for a second. Marissa looked away, her eyes burning. His immediate denial soothed something small inside her, yet the pain of his secrecy lingered like a bruise freshly touched. After a long moment, she asked, Why didn't you tell me about the charity event? About helping her family? Because I didn't want you thinking I was straying, he admitted. I didn't want misunderstandings. I thought keeping that part simple would protect us. He laughed bitterly. I ended up creating the very disaster I was trying to avoid. Her chest tightened. She understood the fear, but the execution left scars that wouldn't disappear overnight. Jake, she said quietly, honesty is the one thing I needed from you the most. You took that from us. He sank to his knees in front of her, not in dramatic desperation, but in genuine remorse. I know, and I will spend the rest of my life proving I will never hide anything from you again. I want us. I still choose us. She closed her eyes. A single tear slid down her cheek. Could she forgive him? Could she rebuild trust with a man who broke it? Could she look at him and not see the child he created with another? She didn't have the answers yet. But she also didn't feel hatred. Not the kind that ends marriages, not the kind that erases history. And that alone frightened her more than the betrayal. Give me time, she whispered. Jake nodded immediately, as though he'd been waiting for those 3 words. I'll give you all the time you need. Delia lowered her head respectfully. I'll go now. Thank you for listening. As she stepped outside, Marissa exhaled shakily. The conversation wasn't finished. The healing hadn't begun. But the truth was finally out in the open, and that was the first step toward whatever came next. Before we continue deeper into Marissa's decision, let me ask you, if you were standing in her place right now, what would your next move be? Would you walk away, or would you try to rebuild something that once felt rare? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you're still with us on this emotional journey, remember to like, share, and subscribe. Marissa spent the next few days wandering through the estate, as though trying to remember how to breathe. Everything felt unfamiliar, even the rooms she'd lived in for years. The kitchen where she made breakfast each morning, the garden she tended when she needed peace, the hallway where she used to greet Jake with a kiss at the end of each day. Now each space carried a quiet ache she couldn't ignore. Jake gave her distance just as she asked, yet he hovered close enough to show he hadn't abandoned the promise he made. He didn't sleep in their bedroom. He didn't assume forgiveness. He didn't push for conversations she wasn't ready for. Instead, he stayed nearby, patient in a way she'd never seen before. But silence has a way of forcing the heart to speak. One afternoon, Marissa found herself in the garden, sitting on the stone bench beneath the rose arch she planted the year they married. The petals were blooming softly, gentle shades of pink and cream swaying in the breeze. She used to find comfort there. Now she felt torn. What did she truly want? She heard footsteps behind her, light, unintrusive. Jake stopped a respectful distance away. "May I sit?" he asked quietly. She hesitated, then nodded. He sat beside her, but not close enough to touch, not close enough to overwhelm, just near enough for his presence to be felt like a fragile thread stretched between them. "I don't expect answers," he said gently. "But if you're willing, I'd like to hear what you're feeling." She stared ahead, watching the petals dance. "I feel lost, confused, hurt, angry." She paused. "But I also feel something I didn't expect." He swallowed. "Which is not ready to walk away." Jake's breath hitched, barely visible but deeply felt. "That means more than you know. Don't read too much into it," she cautioned. "I'm not saying everything is fine. I'm not saying I can forgive easily. I just—" Her voice softened. "I can still see who we were. And I'm not sure I'm ready to let go of that." Jake looked down at his hands. "I'm not asking for forgiveness today. Or tomorrow. I just want the chance to earn it." She studied him quietly. There was no arrogance in his posture, no expectation in his tone. His humility felt unfamiliar, but genuine. "I want honesty," she said. "If we ever move forward from this, I need openness. No secrets, no half-truths. You'll have that," he whispered. "For the rest of my life, you'll have that." Marissa looked away, fighting the tangled emotions in her chest. She wanted transparency. She wanted security. She wanted to feel like the most important person in his life again. "Jake," she said, "do you ever think something in our marriage pushed you away?" He shook his head immediately. "No, nothing you did. You gave me love when I didn't even deserve it. My mistake wasn't caused by unhappiness with you. It came from my own weakness, my own inability to handle stress and loneliness the right way." His voice dropped lower. "I never wanted anyone else. I just made the wrong choice at the wrong moment." She closed her eyes. The honesty hurt, but it also soothed something deep inside her. "Would you have told me about the baby if Delia hadn't insisted?" she asked. His expression tightened. "Eventually, yes, but I can't deny that she pushed me to stop running from the truth. "That scares me," she said, "that you needed someone else to force you to be honest with me." He nodded slowly, accepting that truth with no defense. "I know. And it's something I have to fix within myself. Not for the sake of avoiding consequences, but for the sake of becoming a man worthy of you." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The wind rustled the roses gently, filling the space with quiet calm. Then Marissa asked the question sitting heavy in her chest. "Do you want to be a father to this child?" Jake's eyes softened with conflict. "I want to support the child. I want to be present enough to take responsibility, but not so present that it disrupts your life or our marriage." He hesitated. "But I won't pretend I know how to handle this perfectly. I'm learning as I go. Do you want me involved with the child at all?" she asked softly. Jake looked at her, surprised by the question. "Only if you choose to be. Never because you feel obligated. Never because of guilt. This isn't your burden." Marissa's eyes filled with tears she didn't bother hiding. He reached for her hand cautiously, waiting for permission. She didn't pull away. "I don't know what the future looks like," she whispered. "But I know I loved you before all of this. And I know something inside me still wants to try." Jake exhaled sharply, relief washing over him like a wave. "Then I'll do everything to make this right." She looked down at their joined hands, uncertain but not broken. Trying didn't mean forgetting. Trying didn't mean everything healed overnight. Trying simply meant she hadn't given up. And sometimes that is the first sign of hope after the hardest storm. The following week did not heal everything, but it softened the sharpest edges of Marissa's pain. The estate, once filled with echoing silence, began to breathe again. Conversations were still careful, still tiptoeing around wounded places, but they existed, and that alone meant something. Some days she woke feeling fragile, carrying the weight of what happened like a stone in her chest. Other days she remembered the tenderness she once shared with Jake, and a small spark of hope flickered quietly within her. Healing isn't a straight path. Marissa knew that now. It curves, bends, backtracks, and moves forward again depending on the heart's courage on any given day. One morning, she sat at the dining table, flipping through pages of a book. She wasn't really reading when Jake approached. He stood a few paces away, hands behind his back, waiting for permission to speak. He never interrupted anymore. He never assumed he belonged at her side. Instead, he waited, patient, humble, trying. "Can I join you?" he asked softly. She nodded. He sat across from her, carefully studying her face. "You slept a little better last night." She didn't know how he noticed, but the observation warmed her chest. "I did. I'm glad." His tone was gentle, almost shy. The contrast to his usual commanding presence was striking. Marissa took a breath. "I've been thinking a lot." Jake braced himself silently. "I don't want to live in confusion," she said. "I want clarity about what comes next. For me, for you, for the situation," he nodded. "Ask me anything. I'll answer honestly, no matter what it costs." "Will the baby change our life drastically?" she asked, surprising herself with the directness. Jake didn't rush his response. "It will require support. Financially, yes. Emotionally, I'll respect whatever boundaries you set. I'm not going to bring chaos into our home. The child deserves stability. But so do you. Do you plan to be involved in the birth?" she asked. He thought for a moment. Only if Delia wants me there, and only if you're comfortable with it. I'm not trying to build a second family. I'm fulfilling a responsibility." Marissa appreciated his careful phrasing. For the first time since the truth came out, she felt he understood the depth of her hurt. "And Delia?" she asked softly. "Has she contacted you?" "Only once," he said. "She updated me about a medical appointment. Nothing more." His voice tightened. "I told her that our communication would remain strictly about the child's well-being. Nothing personal." Marissa nodded. The firmness in his tone soothed the unease inside her. She didn't want hostility toward Delia, but she needed boundaries, strong, unshakable ones. Jake hesitated, then asked, "Would you ever want to meet the child someday? When the time feels right?" Her chest tightened at the thought. She wasn't ready to answer that. Not yet. It was too soon, too raw, too tangled. "I don't know," she admitted. "Maybe in the future when this pain isn't fresh. But right now, I need to focus on us." Jake nodded. "That's exactly where my focus is too. On rebuilding what I broke." His sincerity touched her, but she wasn't ready to fall into his arms or accept immediate reconciliation. She still needed distance. She still needed space. But she was willing to keep walking forward, even if the steps were small. Later that afternoon, Marissa went for a walk behind the estate. The wind was cool, brushing leaves across the path, like soft reminders that seasons change whether you're ready or not. She sat beneath the old willow tree overlooking the pond, a place she'd always gone to when her heart felt heavy. Jake found her there an hour later, but he didn't approach immediately. He stood quietly, hands in his pockets, simply observing her. She sensed his presence and glanced back. "You can sit," she said. He walked over, lowering himself to the grass beside her. They watched the water ripple as birds skimmed across its surface. After a long silence, he said, "I want to ask you something, but only if you're ready." She looked at him. "What is it? Would you be open to counseling? Together? Not because we're failing, but because I want us to rebuild with guidance instead of wandering through this on our own." His suggestion stunned her. Jake Irvine, the man who prided himself on handling everything alone, was asking for help, for their marriage. It showed effort. It showed humility. It showed that he wasn't trying to bury the past. He was trying to repair what could still be saved. Marissa's voice softened. "I think that could help us." His relief was immediate, gentle, quiet, but unmistakable. They sat together in silence, but the silence felt different this time, not heavy, not suffocating. More like a pause between two people learning how to breathe next to each other again. When she finally spoke, her voice held a fragile steadiness. "I don't know where we'll end up," she whispered, "but I'm willing to keep trying if you are." Jake's eyes glistened, and he nodded slowly. "I'm here for every step." And for the first time since her world fractured, Marissa felt something shift inside her. Not certainty, not full forgiveness, but a small sense of direction. Not the one she imagined, but one she might be strong enough to face. Marissa is choosing courage over retreat. What about you? If you were in her place, would you agree to rebuild or walk away for good? Tell me in the comments below. Marissa didn't expect to hear from Delia again, not so soon, and not so directly. She assumed the woman would keep her distance, respecting the fragile space she and Jake were trying to rebuild. But healing rarely happens without unexpected moments. and this one arrived in the form of a quiet knock at the estate's side entrance. The housekeeper informed Marissa hesitantly, "There's a woman here. She says her name is Delia. She doesn't want to intrude. She only wants a minute." Marissa's heart jumped to her throat. She wasn't ready. She hadn't rehearsed what she might say or how she might react. She didn't even know if she wanted to look Delia in the eye again. But something urged her forward. Curiosity, fear, or perhaps a need for closure she hadn't realized she needed. She stepped into the hallway and saw Delia waiting near the archway, hands clasped in front of her, stomach noticeably fuller than the last time. She looked exhausted, worn down, carrying a heaviness that had nothing to do with pregnancy. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Delia whispered, "Thank you for seeing me." Marissa nodded stiffly. "Is everything okay?" "Yes," Delia said quickly. "Nothing's wrong with the baby. It's just, I needed to speak to you directly." Alone. There was no hostility in her tone, no defensiveness, only vulnerability. Marissa led her to the sitting room, keeping a respectful distance. She sat opposite her, hands folded tightly in her lap. Delia took a slow breath. "I wanted to apologize again. Not through a letter, not from a doorway, but here, face to face." "You already apologized," Marissa replied quietly. "I know." Delia's voice cracked. "But I didn't apologize for the right thing." That caught Marissa off guard. Delia looked down at her hands, twisting her fingers. "I apologize for not knowing he was married. But I didn't apologize for the pain my presence brought into your life. Even if I didn't intend it, I still contributed to it." Marissa tightened her jaw, steadying herself. "It wasn't just you. Jake made his choices too." "I know," Delia whispered. "And he's taking responsibility. But I needed you to know, I never once thought he was choosing me. Not then, not now. He talks about you with a kind of devotion I've never seen before in a man." Marissa's breath caught. Hearing that from the woman carrying his child should have hurt, but instead it stirred something else, clarity. Delia continued, "I didn't come here for sympathy. I came because someone once told me that when the truth is painful, avoiding it only makes it heavier. And you—" she hesitated. "You deserve to see me not as a threat, but as someone who made a mistake and wants to step out of your life with dignity." Marissa blinked slowly. "Step out?" "Yes," Delia said. "I'm leaving the city in 2 months. I'll keep Jake informed about important things, but I won't involve myself more than necessary. I don't want to be a shadow over your marriage." A strange wave of relief washed over Marissa, but so did guilt. "Where will you go?" she asked. "My hometown," Delia replied. "I'll have support there. It's small, but peaceful. And the child will grow in a place where there isn't tension." Marissa studied her. The fatigue, the determination, the quiet acceptance. "You could stay here," Marissa said carefully. "Not in our home, but in the city. You don't have to uproot your life." Delia shook her head. "I do. I need a fresh start, and you need the chance to rebuild without my presence lingering." The honesty was disarming. After a long pause, Marissa whispered, "I appreciate you coming here. Truly, it means more than you think." Delia's eyes softened. "I didn't expect you to forgive me. I didn't come for that. But I wanted you to know, I respect your marriage. And I respect you." The words didn't mend everything, but they stitched a small part of Marissa's heart that had been torn open. Delia stood slowly. "I'll go now." Marissa rose as well. "Take care of yourself." "And the baby?" A small, grateful smile curved on Delia's lips. "I will." As she left, Marissa watched through the window, feeling something shift within her, a release of a tension she didn't realize she'd been gripping so tightly. When she turned around, she found Jake standing in the doorway, having witnessed only the end of the interaction. His expression was unreadable: concern, curiosity, perhaps even admiration. "How much did you hear?" she asked. "Just the last part," he said softly. "You didn't have to speak to her. You didn't owe her anything." "I know," Marissa replied. "But I needed to understand her, and I needed her to understand me." Jake approached slowly, cautious as always. "Are you okay?" She nodded, surprisingly. Yes. For the first time in weeks, she felt lighter, not healed, not whole, but lighter. "Jake," she said quietly, "if we're going to move forward, I need honesty, complete honesty. No matter how uncomfortable." He stepped closer. "You'll have it. Always." She believed him, not blindly, but with cautious hope. And sometimes, cautious hope is the first step toward genuine healing. If you've ever faced a moment where two lives collided with yours in painful ways, how did you handle it? Would you have shown compassion like Marissa? Or walked away? Share your thoughts below. The following days unfolded with a quiet tension that felt different from the pain before. It wasn't the ache of betrayal anymore. It was the strain of rebuilding something fragile, something that required patience, honesty, and courage from both sides. Marissa and Jake were no longer standing on opposite ends of a shattering truth. Now they stood somewhere in the middle, trying to repair the pieces one careful moment at a time. Their home didn't instantly warm again. Trust didn't suddenly appear. But conversations became deeper, steadier. The distance between them slowly narrowed, like two souls learning to walk beside each other after nearly drifting apart. One morning, Marissa found Jake in the kitchen making coffee, a rare sight she hadn't seen in months. He looked up, startled, as if he'd been caught doing something meaningful. "I thought you might like some," he said, avoiding eye contact at first. "You always make it for us." "I wanted to be the one today." She didn't smile. Not fully. But something in her chest softened. "Thank you." He handed her the cup with careful hands, as though he feared he might drop the moment if he moved too fast. They sat at the island, their mugs between them. The silence wasn't heavy like before, just uncertain. After a moment, Jake cleared his throat. "I've arranged counseling sessions with a therapist who specializes in couples healing, someone neutral, someone who can help us navigate all this without pressure." Marissa nodded, grateful. "When do we start?" "Whenever you're ready." "I'm ready," she said. The first session arrived sooner than she expected. They sat across from a calm, attentive therapist who listened more than she spoke. Marissa shared her anger, her heartbreak, her confusion. Jake shared his shame, his fear, his regret. Neither tried to win. Neither tried to blame. For the first time, they aired everything with the honesty their marriage had been missing for months. After the session, Jake walked Marissa to the car. "Thank you for being open," he said quietly. "Thank you for listening," she replied. The small steps mattered. Later that evening, Marissa walked into the bedroom to find Jake sitting by the window, staring out into the fading light. She hesitated, but eventually approached him. He nodded without turning. "Anything." She sat on the edge of the bed. When all this began, when you started drifting away, what were you feeling? What made you pull back from me? He inhaled slowly, gathering his thoughts. I felt overwhelmed. Not because of you. Never because of you. I felt like the weight of my work was stretching me thin, and instead of leaning on you like I should have, I pulled away. I convinced myself I had to handle everything alone. You didn't trust me with your struggles, she whispered. I didn't trust myself not to break under the pressure, he admitted. And I was afraid that if I showed weakness, I'd disappoint you. His confession struck her deeply. Jake, marriage isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. I know that now, he said. I just wish I'd realized it before all of this. He shifted closer. I can't change what happened, Marissa, but I can control what I do from here. I'm committed to being better, not just for you, but for us. She met his eyes for a long moment. There was pain there, but there was also sincerity. And that sincerity carried a quiet strength she hadn't seen in a while. Do you still love me? She asked softly. Jake didn't hesitate. More than anything, even when I failed you, my heart never left you. Her chest tightened with a mixture of relief and sorrow. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to hold on to the love they built. But she also needed time to trust again. I'm trying, she whispered. But I need you to understand something. I'm not afraid of the child, she said. I'm afraid of the secrets, the silence, the distance we had. I can face anything with you as long as you don't shut me out. Jake's expression shifted into something raw and absolute. You'll never be shut out again. Not from my fears. Not from my truth. Not from my life. For the first time since the day everything cracked open, Marissa leaned into him. Not fully, not effortlessly, but willingly. He wrapped an arm around her tension-softened frame. They stayed like that until the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the room in muted gold. Later that night, Marissa stood in front of the bathroom mirror, studying her own reflection. She expected to see uncertainty staring back at her, but instead she saw strength, quiet, emerging strength she didn't realize she had. Jake stepped into the doorway, watching her carefully. Are you okay? He asked. She nodded slowly. I'm starting to think I might be... He gave a small nod, emotion tightening his voice. You deserve peace, and I'll do everything in my power to help you find it. Marissa turned off the bathroom light and faced him directly. We'll find it together, she said. But it's not going to be easy. I'm not afraid of the work, he replied. Not anymore. Their eyes held for a moment longer, both of them understanding that while the past couldn't be erased, the future was still unwritten, still open, still possible, and for the first time in weeks, Marissa didn't fear the next chapter. She welcomed it. A week later, Marissa found herself in a place she never imagined she'd be, walking side by side with Jake through the quiet corridors of a counseling center. Their sessions had grown more open, more honest. The conversations weren't easy, but they were real. And real was something they hadn't shared in a long time. After their latest session, they lingered in the parking lot, neither ready to leave. The air felt different, lighter, like a slow thaw after a long winter. Jake leaned against the car, arms crossed, watching her with gentle curiosity. You've been quieter today, Marissa shrugged. Just thinking about us, he asked. About everything. He didn't push. He waited, patient and steady. She turned toward him. Jake, what is your plan when the baby arrives? He straightened, aware that this was a turning point. I'll be present enough to take responsibility. Medical care, financial support, legal protection, whatever the child needs. And us, she asked. He exhaled slowly. My involvement will not invade our home. I won't bring confusion or discomfort into your space. Everything will stay separate unless you choose otherwise. She appreciated his clarity. I'm not ready to think about being involved, she said honestly. But I don't want resentment to grow between us because of something we avoid discussing. You're not obligated to accept the child as part of your life, he replied. That decision is yours alone, and I'll honor it. His voice held no pressure, no expectation, just truth. Marissa nodded, relieved. Thank you. As they got into the car, she noticed him glancing her way, studying her expression with a tenderness that contrasted the chaos they'd been through. He reached for her hand, paused, then pulled back. She noticed. The fact that he waited for permission before touching her meant more than he realized. Jake, she said quietly. He looked over. You can hold my hand? A soft breath escaped him, relief mixed with gratitude. He reached out and laced their fingers together with a gentleness she hadn't felt in months. They drove home in comfortable silence, a silence that didn't hurt anymore. Later that evening, Marissa prepared a simple dinner. She didn't cook often during the emotional storm. Food had felt meaningless when her heart felt fractured. But tonight, she wanted normalcy. She wanted routine. Jake entered the kitchen, stopping at the doorway as though waiting for her to invite him in. Do you need help? She nodded. You can chop the vegetables, he smiled faintly. That I can do. They worked side by side in a rhythm that felt familiar yet new. Two people learning each other again, rediscovering the language of partnership. It wasn't the same as before. It was more intentional now, more mindful. As they set the table, Jake hesitated. Marissa, can I ask you something personal? She braced herself. Go ahead. When you look at me now, what do you feel? Honestly? She looked down at her hands for a long moment before answering. I feel pain, she admitted. I feel disappointment. I feel fear. He swallowed hard but nodded, accepting her truth. But, she continued softly, I also feel the reason I said yes to you all those years ago. I feel the tenderness that made me trust you, and I feel the small beginnings of hope. Jake froze, the words landing deeply. Marissa looked him in the eyes. Hope is fragile, but it's there. His voice cracked. I'll protect that hope with everything I have. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she placed the last dish on the table and sat down. Jake joined her, watching her with careful gratitude. They ate in quiet harmony. Halfway through the meal, Marissa set her fork down. Jake, she said, I've been thinking about the child. He froze, but not in panic, more in anticipation. I don't know yet if I can be involved, she said gently. But I don't want to root my decisions in anger. I want to make choices I won't regret in 10 years. He nodded, listening intently. I might want to meet the child someday, she continued. Not now, not during the pregnancy, but maybe in the future, when my heart is stronger. Jake's eyes softened. There's no pressure. Whenever you're ready, or if you're never ready, That'll be enough. She appreciated his delicacy. She appreciated that he didn't assume, didn't push, didn't try to sway her. "Jake," she said after a long pause, "I need one thing from you." "Anything," he replied. "Consistency. Not perfection, not grand gestures, just consistency." He nodded slowly. "I can give you that. I will give you that." After dinner, they stood in the hallway where they'd once shared countless kisses before bed. The tension between them was not the bitter strain from before, but a quiet, growing warmth. Jake stepped closer, stopping just inches away. "Can I kiss you?" he whispered. Then, softly, she said, "Yes." It wasn't a passionate kiss fueled by desire. It was gentle, slow, deliberate. A kiss that asked permission. A kiss that offered reassurance. A kiss that promised work, not shortcuts. When they pulled away, her forehead rested lightly against his. "We'll take this one day at a time," she whispered. "One day at a time," he echoed. For the first time, she believed they could, not because the pain was gone, not because trust was instantly restored, but because they were choosing the path forward, together. And so, the morning after their kiss, Marissa woke with a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time, a subtle calm, not joy, not certainty, but calm. The kind that gently rests on your chest without demanding anything from you. She stepped onto the balcony, wrapped in her robe, watching the early light spill across the estate grounds. The air was cool, touching her skin with a quiet reminder that the world kept moving, even when life felt heavy. When she turned, Jake stood in the doorway. He didn't approach, didn't assume he was welcome. He simply said, "Good morning," in a tone that carried gratitude more than routine. She nodded. "Good morning." He hesitated. "I made breakfast?" She raised an eyebrow. "You cooked?" His cheeks warmed slightly. "Attempted to. Whether it's edible is still up for debate." Marissa chuckled before she could stop herself. The sound surprised them both. It had been so long since laughter came without effort. "Let's see what you made," she said. They walked to the dining room, where Jake revealed a plate of slightly uneven pancakes, fruit, and a pot of tea made exactly how she liked it. He didn't look proud. He looked hopeful. "You don't have to do all this," she told him gently. "I want to," he said. "I want to contribute, not just apologize." That distinction mattered. They ate in a comfortable quiet. When they finished, Marissa stood to clear the table, but Jake stopped her. "I've got it," he said. "You've carried so much. Let me handle this." She let him. Later that day, they attended another counseling session. This one felt different from the others. They weren't just unpacking pain. They were learning how to communicate again. How to speak without fear. How to listen without defensiveness. The therapist asked, "What do you each fear most as you move forward?" Marissa answered first. "That the past will repeat itself. That I'll see signs and convince myself it's nothing until it's something again." Jake looked devastated by her honesty, but he didn't interrupt. He waited until the therapist turned to him. "And you?" she asked. "I fear failing her again," Jake said. "I fear becoming the man who made her cry in the first place. I never want to be a source of pain in her life again." The therapist nodded thoughtfully. "Fear isn't the enemy. Silence is. Keep speaking. keep hearing each other. After the session, Marissa felt emotionally drained, but strangely connected to Jake in a way she hadn't felt in months. As they walked to the car, he reached for her hand, slowly, allowing her a chance to pull back. She didn't. That evening, while Jake worked in his study, Marissa explored the guest room where she'd been sleeping. The room had become her place of reflection, a space where she reorganized her thoughts, her emotions, her sense of self. On the nightstand lay the letter Delia had written. She hadn't touched it since the day she read it, yet something compelled her to pick it up again, not out of pain, but out of understanding. She read the final sentences once more. You deserve joy, Marissa. Whether with him or without him, this moment doesn't have to be the end of your story. Marissa closed her eyes slowly. Maybe Delia's words were meant to empower, not wound. She placed the letter back down, a quiet acceptance blooming in her chest. She didn't forgive everything, not yet, but she was beginning to make peace with the truth. Come in, she said softly. Jake entered, hands in his pockets. I didn't want to disturb you, but I wanted to ask if you'd like to watch a movie tonight. Something light, something simple. Marissa considered it. Reconnecting didn't have to be dramatic. Sometimes it was the tiny, ordinary choices that rebuilt a life. Okay, she said. His shoulders dropped with relief. I'll set everything up. Jake stayed still, waiting for her to guide the moment. Eventually, Marissa leaned slightly toward him, just enough that their shoulders brushed. Jake didn't move an inch, afraid the wrong gesture might break the fragile progress they'd made. Their closeness felt new again, not taken for granted, not assumed, but chosen. Near the end of the movie, Marissa whispered, Thank you. For what? Jake asked softly. He turned to her slowly, emotion tightening his voice. There's nothing in my life more worth fighting for than you. She looked away, but a small smile pulled at the corner of her lips. When the movie ended, she stood to leave the room, but Jake gently caught her hand, not gripping, just holding. Marissa, he said quietly, I know we're not healed. I know we have a long road ahead, but I promise you, I won't lose sight of us again. And, for the first time since their world cracked open, she believed he meant every word. Good night, Jake, she whispered. Good night, he said, his voice thick with hope. As she walked to her room, she realized something powerful. Healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about rewriting the future, one careful day at a time. Me teams. Choosing each other again is the bravest step of all. The next month unfolded like a series of cautious steps, each one deliberate, intentional, and grounded in the desire to rebuild what once felt unbreakable. Marissa and Jake didn't pretend the past hadn't happened. They didn't rush into declarations or act as though wounds had magically disappeared. Instead, they walked the slow path, the difficult, sometimes painful road of rediscovery. Their counseling sessions became a safe place where truth wasn't feared. Jake continued to show consistency, sharing his schedule, being transparent about calls, checking in emotionally, rather than assuming silence meant peace. Marissa, in turn, began reconnecting with parts of herself she had abandoned during their months of strain. Their progress wasn't perfect. Some nights Marissa cried without warning. Some mornings Jake woke with guilt heavy on his chest. Some conversations reopened hurt they thought had faded, but they faced each moment honestly. One evening, after another counseling session, They sat in the car listening to the soft hum of the engine. "We're different now," Marissa said quietly. Jake nodded. "We are. Do you think that's good or bad?" she asked. He turned to her. "I think we're stronger. Not because of what happened, but because of what we're choosing now. Every day." She looked out the window, watching cars pass. "Sometimes I still feel like I'm waiting for the pain to hit again." "That's normal," Jake replied gently. "Healing isn't a straight path." Marissa closed her eyes, letting his words settle. "I want to keep moving forward. But I also want to honor how much this changed me." Jake nodded thoughtfully. "Then let's build something new. Not a replacement for what we lost, but something better." His words touched a place inside her that had long been dormant. 2 weeks later, Marissa received a call that surprised her. Delia. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. "I wanted to let you know," she said. "I'll be leaving the city next week. My doctor believes I'll be fine traveling, and I think it's time." Marissa took a slow breath. "Thank you for telling me." "I also wanted to thank you," Delia continued. "You didn't have to speak to me the way you did. You didn't owe me kindness. But you showed it anyway." Marissa remained quiet. Kindness didn't erase the pain, but cruelty wouldn't have healed anything. "Take care of yourself," she said finally, "and take good care of the baby." "I will," Delia whispered, "and I wish you nothing but peace." When the call ended, Marissa exhaled a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. It felt like a door closing gently, ending a chapter, not violently, but with acceptance. Later that night, Marissa found Jake in the living room, staring into the fireplace as flames flickered softly. "She's leaving," Marissa said. He turned, eyes softening. "Are you okay?" "I am," she said. "It feels final, but in a way that brings clarity instead of confusion. I want us to move forward with intention," she said. "No more pretending everything is fine. No more glossing over hard things. I want communication. I want honesty. I want partnership. You have all of that," he promised quietly. "Every bit of it. And—" She hesitated, then continued. "When the baby arrives, I want to meet them someday. When I'm ready. Not because I'm forced into it, but because I want to make peace with the reality that they exist." Jake blinked, moved to the point of speechlessness. "Marissa, you don't know what that means to me. I'm not doing it for you," she said softly. "I'm doing it for me, so I don't carry resentment into our future." His breath trembled. "Whatever pace you choose, I'll follow." She stepped closer, placing her hand against his chest. "We've come a long way, Jake, and I'm proud of the work we've done." He covered her hand with his. "I'm not done proving myself. I know," she whispered, "and I'm not done healing." Their eyes held for a long moment, an acknowledgement that love wasn't restored in a single heartbeat, but in thousands of small, steady beats over time. Over the next week, they began crafting new routines. Evenings spent talking without distractions. Mornings shared over tea and quiet conversation. Walks through the garden where fears dissolved and hopes resurfaced. One night, while watching the sun set beyond the estate grounds, Marissa spoke words she hadn't been ready to say aloud. "I'm ready to move back into our room." Jake froze, turning to her slowly. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I've carried my pain alone long enough. If we're rebuilding, I want to rebuild beside you." He didn't pull her close. He didn't rush. Later, as they stood together in the doorway of the bedroom they once shared, Marissa felt a quiet peace settle inside her. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was honest. They lay beside each other that night, not clinging, not rushing the intimacy, but resting in the calm that comes from choosing healing over fear. And in that stillness, Marissa realized something profound. Love doesn't survive because it avoids storms. Love survives because it learns how to rebuild after them. 3 months later, the estate felt different, not because it had changed, but because they had. What once felt like a home filled with silence and doubt now carried a gentle hum of renewed connection. It wasn't perfect. No relationship ever truly is. But the silence that remained was warm, peaceful, and born of understanding, not fear. Marissa woke earlier than usual. She stepped out of bed quietly, letting the soft light of dawn spill across the room. Jake slept deeply beside her, his face relaxed, no longer carrying the tightness he once wore like armor. He had learned to open up, to be present, to offer vulnerability instead of distance. She watched him for a moment, remembering how far they had come. The shock, the letter, the conversations that tore them open and stitched them back together, the countless moments when either of them could have walked away, but chose not to. She touched his shoulder gently. "Jake," she whispered. He stirred, blinking slowly. "Morning," he murmured, voice thick with sleep. He nodded, watching her with quiet affection before she slipped out of the room. Outside, the air was cool and crisp. Marissa walked along the familiar stone path, the arch of roses now in full bloom. It amazed her how nature continued to flourish even when her life felt like it was falling apart. She sat on the bench beneath the arch, closing her eyes as the breeze brushed her cheeks. She felt calm, a calm she had earned through tears, honesty, and resilience. Footsteps soon approached. Jake sat beside her, careful but comfortable. "You wanted to talk?" "Yes," she said softly. She took a slow breath. The baby was born yesterday. Delia texted. Jake's breath hitched slightly. "Is everything okay?" Jake looked down at his hands. "I'll support him. I'll be responsible. But I don't want you to feel pressured to be part of any of it." Marissa shook her head gently. "I'm not pressured. I'm choosing." He lifted his gaze slowly, eyes full of uncertainty. "Choosing what?" Marissa's voice softened. "I want to meet him. When you visit." She nodded. "This isn't about replacing anything. This is about understanding the full truth of our life. I don't want to live in a shadow. I want clarity, peace. And I want to know the child who will always be part of your world." Jake looked away as tears pooled in his eyes, not of guilt, but of gratitude. "You're extraordinary," he whispered. "No," she said gently. "I'm just choosing healing over resentment." He nodded slowly, overwhelmed. For the first time, he allowed a tear to fall. She reached for his hand, something she wouldn't have done months ago, but now felt natural. "Jake, I'm not doing this because it's easy. I'm doing it because love is a journey. And I've learned mine isn't fragile. It bends. It stretches. It hurts. But it doesn't break." He squeezed her hand, reverence in his touch. "I'll spend my life honoring that. 2 days later, Marissa stood beside Jake in a small apartment just outside the city, Delia's temporary place before she moved home. The baby lay in a crib near the window, wrapped in soft blankets, sleeping peacefully. Marissa's heart pounded as she approached. She expected to feel fear, tension, maybe even anger. But instead, she felt something gentler, understanding, acceptance. A closing of an emotional wound she didn't realize still lingered. The baby stirred slightly, tiny fingers curling. Delia stood nearby, quiet, respectful. "You don't have to hold him if you're not ready," she said softly. Marissa shook her head. "I want to—" Jake stood close, watching with a mixture of nerves and admiration. Delia gently placed the baby in Marissa's arms. The warmth, the weight, the innocence. It washed over her like a calm tide. He was simply a life that existed because of a moment neither of them intended. "He's beautiful," she whispered. Delia smiled weakly. "Thank you." Jake stepped closer, his hand lightly touching Marissa's back. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "I am," and for the first time since the day her world crumbled, she truly meant it. Back at the estate later that evening, Marissa curled into Jake's arms on the couch. The fire crackled softly. The room felt safe. He turned slightly. "What is it?" "You hurt me," she said honestly, deeply. "But you also fought for me. You showed up. You changed. And you helped me find strength I didn't know I had." He breathed, deeply, emotion thickening his voice. "I'll never forgive myself for hurting you. But I'll forever be grateful. You allowed us to heal." He kissed the top of her head gently. "Our story isn't perfect." "No," she agreed softly. "But it's real. And it's ours." They sat quietly, wrapped in warmth and understanding. Not because the past disappeared. Not because they pretended it never happened, but because they chose to rise above it. Together. In a world where love often collapses under pressure, theirs survived. Not because it avoided hardship, but because it faced it, learned from it, and rebuilt something stronger than what existed before. Marissa closed her eyes, allowing peace to settle into every corner of her heart. She had found clarity. She had found closure. She had found a future worth walking toward. Not perfect, not painless, but genuine. And that was more than enough. Tell me in the comments, would you have given love a second chance the way Marissa did? Or would you have chosen to walk away? Your thoughts matter. If this ending moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories with deep life lessons.